Under a gray morning sky at Fort Arden's elite training compound, Cadet Reagan Vale stood at the edge of the obstacle pit, mud up to her boots, sweat streaking down her jawline, listening to the laughter roll across the yard as another male recruit shouted, "Hey, sweetheart, you forget your makeup or your muscle," while the others howled, not realizing she had already clocked all of them. Their footwork, timing, weaknesses. The way a predator studies prey before it moves. But she said nothing, just adjusted her stance and waited for the signal. Because from day one she had known she wasn't here to prove herself to them. She was here for one reason. To finish what her mother started. To wear the name Vale in silence. And to resurrect something that should never have been buried. Something the Pentagon pretended didn't exist anymore. Black Viper, a shadow program wiped off the books after a mission in Korangal Valley went south, leaving only one survivor whose name was never made public, whose body was never recovered, and whose daughter disappeared from every system at age 13, reappearing years later under a fake identity, enlisting with no fanfare, no favors, no media, just the quiet fire of someone who'd already bled in the dark before ever putting on a uniform. And when the whistle blew, she launched into motion, silent, surgical, a blur of elbows and knees and precision as the much larger cadet in front of her swung wide and slow, grinning like this was a joke, until he was. Flat on his back with her knee to his throat, choking on mud in disbelief as the sergeant stepped forward, blinked, and said nothing because there was nothing to say. She'd executed the takedown faster than he could blink, and suddenly the other recruits weren't laughing anymore, just staring, some with narrowed eyes, others with something like fear, until footsteps echoed from behind and the yard went quiet, not out of respect but out of rank, because the man walking toward her wore stars on his collar and a history in his eyes. Colonel Harrow, who'd commanded Black Ops units for 2 decades and seen men break under pressure Reagan would later call Wednesday. And as he stopped beside her, he didn't look at her like the others did. Instead, he leaned in and whispered, "Jesus, are you a Black Viper?" And though she said nothing, the flicker in her eyes was answer enough. And from that moment, everything shifted. Not officially, not in the open, but behind closed doors, where files were pulled and protocols reactivated. And Harrow handed her a sealed envelope marked Directive 7 and said, "If the time comes, open this." Nothing outranks it. And for the next 3 months, while the others mocked, tested, or avoided her, she kept her head down and her hands calloused, running drills twice as long, sleeping half as much, beating every score and still asking for more representatives. While whispers spread across the base like wildfire, stories of her demolishing targets blindfolded, of intercepting a drone with nothing but a stick, of speaking in Russian during her sleep, but no one could confirm any of it. And that's how legends work. In silence, in shadows, in disbelief that shifts to or when the truth becomes undeniable. And that moment came during an advanced simulation exercise known only to the top-tier candidates, a mock hostage retrieval set in the remote pine forest north of the base, where teams were to locate and extract a volunteer hostage using non-lethal weapons. But what the cadets didn't know, and what Reagan felt before it even happened, was that the simulation had been hijacked by mercenaries hired by a rogue private contractor, testing the Army's vulnerability, using real weapons with non-lethal rounds that could still crack ribs, disable limbs, or kill if the angle was wrong. And when the first cadet went down screaming at Checkpoint Alpha, chaos exploded, radio jammers fried comms, smoke bombs flooded the woods, and the simulation turned real, brutal, and silent, as trainees scattered in fear, some abandoning the mission altogether, others trying to hide. But not Reagan. She moved into the trees like she was returning home, vanishing between trunks, recalculating routes, stitching together sounds, tracks, patterns, crawling through nettles and water to extract 2 cadets who'd been zip-tied to a tree with stun cuffs on their necks, whispering, "Don't panic. Blink if you're conscious." Then disabling the traps with a paperclip, a watch, battery, and 6 inches of wire from her boot heel. And as the forest descended into terror, she moved methodically, locating one of the injured mercs, removing his earpiece, feeding him false intel, rerouting their sweeps, and by hour 6, she had created a map in her head of every hostile, every weapon cache, every weak point. And when she finally found the hostage, bound in the collapsed ruins of an old ranger station with 2 guards pacing nearby, she didn't hesitate. Flanking left, she triggered a flash flare using a stripped matchstick and a candy wrapper, then launched herself through the side wall as it buckled, knocking one man unconscious with a plank and disabling the other with a broken table leg, all before they could raise a weapon. Then hoisted the hostage, barely conscious, dehydrated, onto her back and began the mile-long exfil uphill through thorned ravines. All while being hunted by drones she misdirected using a thermal blanket and a decoy made of gear stuffed in a jacket. And when she finally reached the evac point and fired the red flare into the sky, Colonel Harrow and the emergency response team were already waiting, eyes scanning the tree line as she emerged carrying the hostage like a sack of grain, her face blooded, uniform torn, but posture unbroken. And as she collapsed beside the rescue van, she held up the Merc's earpiece and simply said, "You've got a breach," and passed out. And in the hours that followed, the truth unraveled fast. Classified footage showed her rescuing 9 cadets, outmaneuvering armed ex-military operatives, and disabling a rogue network of hardware planted deep in the training compound systems. And while others were still being treated for shock, she walked out of the infirmary with nothing but a stitched shoulder and a report in her hand, asking the colonel, "Do I still need to prove I belong?" To which he replied, "No. Now the others need to prove they can keep up." And word of what happened spread beyond the base, to Joint Command, to a forgotten list of names once involved in Black Viper, and to a secured email marked for the Secretary of Defense with a subject line that read, "Asset identified, unredacted." And within days, new protocols were drafted, a new team assembled, and a new insignia sewn quietly onto Reagan's sleeve. A black serpent coiled around a blade, the mark of those who operate without recognition, without rank, without fear. And though most cadets still didn't know the full story, they knew enough. That she wasn't someone to challenge, that she didn't boast, didn't flinch, and didn't forget. And when one of the new recruits tried to mock her on the range, another cadet grabbed his arm and whispered, "Don't, she's the reason you're even standing here." And from that moment on, she became more than a soldier. She became a symbol, a shadow behind every success the unit had. And when the base faced a cyber breach that paralyzed half the systems, she was the one who bypassed the mainframe using a relic laptop and a sequence code her mother taught her at age 6. And when a classified Recon drone was captured by a foreign militia during a desert op, it was her who volunteered to cross the border in civilian clothes, recover it, and disappear before they knew what happened. And with every mission, every silence, every whisper behind closed doors, her legend grew, not in headlines, not in medals, but in the way soldiers looked at her, with respect earned through grit, skill, and scars no one saw. And late at night, alone in the barracks, she'd sometimes stare at the old photo tucked in her boot, her mother in full gear, holding a young girl's hand at sunrise, and whisper, "I kept my promise," then close her eyes and rest, because tomorrow would bring another test, and she would meet it like she always did, with silence, precision, and the fury of a storm coiled in. Quiet, the fury of a name they once buried, a name now reborn through her. Black Viper.